Thanks very much for that warm welcome. I too would like to pay respect for the Kalkadoon people. The opportunity to come up here, I'd like to pay respect for past, present and emerging leaders. Today I'm actually not experienced in the culture, in these sort of in the cultural aspects that have been spoken about. I am learning a lot, and I've enjoying the conference immensely. My background, as was said, is that I'm mostly in nursing education and education across broader disciplines. So I do realise that I am between you and morning tea. So I will just keep this as a little bit of a conversation around some of my experiences, and I would like to pay my respects to Carol Jeffrey, who assisted with this. And also I am in this little paper I am talking about a project that we did with Sabina and Sue Lenthal a few years ago, and some learnings and some reflections on that subsequent. I understand Sabina may have presented the actual project, so I'm not last year, so I'm not going to go into that in detail, but just to talk about some sort of reflections on that. So just to set the scene, so what I wanted to do is talk about the Aboriginal Cultural Security Framework. This has been developed by Northern Territory Health. It's a 2016 to 2026 strategic plan. It talks a lot about cultural safety, and it's an excellent document in really in a way forward. So I'd like to raise that as sort of the basis of where we need to go. I'd actually like to talk about the Nurses Code of Conduct. Many of you may or may not be aware, the 1st of March it came out, and it came up with a lot of political fanfare. I don't know, there was some very outspoken people in far north Queensland, and it did hit the news several nights running because of its white privilege statements. And I'd also then sort of talk about practice-based experience as a powerful learning modality. So just to start, many of you are probably familiar with the cultural security framework put out by the NT government. And it's really just all the sorts of things that many of you will be familiar with. Cultural security goes well beyond the behaviour change of individuals. It encapsulates systemic changes. And we really, as nurses, as with the many health professionals that we work with, we need to address the activities, behaviours, policies and standards that promote the highest level of cultural competence. But critically, the cultural security is about ensuring it's not necessarily just about us changing our behaviour and saying, therefore it should be right. It's really securing that Aboriginal people feel safe and secure in the healthcare. So I will just, for those that aren't familiar with this, this is the Code of Conduct for nurses. It came out on the 1st of March, as I said, with a lot of political discussion that hit the news. Anyway, so it talks about white privilege. It really wanted to, this being a new code of conduct, the code of conduct for midwives is very similar. It really wanted to emphasise the importance of nurses engaging in a culturally safe and respectful way. Interestingly enough, for all the other professions in the room, your code of conducts that you've had in existence for about the last 5 to 8 years do not have, they have general cultural respect statements. They don't have a statement specifically about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. It is apparently looking at undergoing review. My understanding is that I don't think it will be looking like the Code of Conduct for nurses or midwives, but that remains to be seen. They envisage that that review process will take a couple of years. So that is the Principle 3, and this is associated with that is culturally safe and respectful practice. And these sorts of principles are in most of the codes of conduct for medicine, dentistry, physio, OT. A lot of those professions have very similar codes of conduct. Nursing and midwifery is just different. So what I'd like to talk a bit now is about best practice objective structured clinical examinations. This is called OSCE. For those in the medical profession, you have OSCAs. These OSCEs that we use in nursing are a little bit different. In medicine, they'll have particular skill sessions. They're focused on particular aspects. nursing, once again, takes a different approach. There are some principles that we've published about in relation to the effective use of these, and that is relevant learning objectives. So having objectives that are authentic, realistic. Basically, the performing activities in an integrated fashion. So rather than just someone doing a particular skill, the assessment is looking at how they engage with their client, you know, their communication skills, professional behaviour, as well as their technical skills. Appropriate timing, and that refers to the scaffolding when that particular activity is within the nursing program, and the practice and effective use of feedback. And so that is what I'm talking a little bit about today, is extending that use of feedback. And you will see Sabina and Sue in those publications that we were working with. So previously, when we've looked at, we looked at integrating the use of these best practice principles in OSCAs for rural and remote, and it was received very well. This is some of the comments by the students. It starts with building rapport. You find something to talk about, and I'd actually like to thank Sue Lenthal in her work in all of this, because she does some amazing work in the preparation of the nurses for those remote areas. And this is a sort of feedback based on the excellent work that she was doing. The OSCA gave the opportunity to practice and get feedback, reflect on skills, and it was a safe space and encouraged the use of soft skills. So what I'd really like to talk now about is this additional step, and this is feedback from the learner. Now, just to recap, I really enjoyed the talk yesterday by Sue and her colleague, finding out about the course in Catherine. If you do recall, when they were talking about the preparation and the great work they were doing with interprofessionally, is that you will have noticed that the nurses rated highly their respect for Indigenous cultures after that experience, but they did not rate their confidence to interact nearly as highly, and this is really what I'd like to address. If we're looking at this very much, this the nurses' codes of conduct, is that if nurses move from, and I know that there's all this recruitment and this movement, and I do come from that sort of southeast Queensland heavily dominated sort of hospitalised healthcare sort of system, which unfortunately is where a lot of the funding goes, and is unfortunately where a lot of the nursing workforce end up. The reality is, and we've heard how difficult it is to get social change and practice change, we need to be moving a lot of those people and a lot of those, the nurses and the care that are given to community-based care. But what we have is a very hospital-centric nursing workforce, and I don't know, I'm not aware of the exact figures, but I am aware that they're very highly dominant in the tertiary hospitals and the metropolitan health hospitals in the southeast corner. So I think what I wanted to do is really explore the sorts of feelings that these nurses that are very much in these sort of systems, that really if they're going to move to engaging and interacting, is that we need to encourage them to explore their feelings, because, you know, I feel like an alien, I'm viewed as having an advantage. That refers to the right white privilege. I feel afraid, I only have a superficial understanding of concerns, therefore I'm a fraud and will be shown up. I feel lost, the client will not talk to me, and once again, they don't know how to, they don't have the skills in that rapport. Things like, I need to know to do it in their time, but I have limited time. I can only put a band-aid on the issues and associated with their condition. So there are some tensions. Building rapport is about responding to their needs, not using the opportunity to attend to other concerns that might be perceived by the nurse. And so an example that I particularly want to give is that a lot of the work is about building rapport. And so what happens is that if you're in the situation where an Aboriginal person is, you're in receipt, a lot of our nursing tendencies, because we're always sort of focused on the whole patient, is that you may then want to go into this lecture and spiel, and we know nurses are pretty good at telling people what they should and shouldn't be doing, and so that is entirely inappropriate. And I think that it's really just assisting the nurses to what do we do in these situations. So the advice is consistently given for non-Indigenous workers to, in particular, consult with community to gain a relevant understanding. But it's about what is of value to this practice. And I think what is important, if we are going to educate these nurses to address what is specified in the Code of Conduct and to be receptive, is that we've actually got to create a learning context for them, a safe space where they can actually share their fears, that they can actually feel comfortable that the sort of care that is currently in programs about you have to address every element of that of your client's concerns. Actually, it may not be appropriate that if an Aboriginal person comes to you and they've got a cut, you address the cut, you do what they want, and recognise that they have their needs are met, and that at another time, if they may want to address something else with you, well, then they will come to you. But it's about nurses actually feeling comfortable with those sort of interactions, because unfortunately, many of the programs in nursing don't actually address those sorts of needs and how best to accommodate them. So I think the important part is that there is no easy, simple solution, but it really is just about sharing strategies through their education programs. Thanks very much.